When we think of revenge thrillers, we usually picture a ton of bullets and massive explosions, right? But what if the ultimate weapon was actually just the truth? Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into Claudia D. Reid's pitch document and character bible for a project called Kill, Fire, Darkness. We're going to break down exactly how a prestige-noir thriller is engineered from the ground up. We'll look at the narrative mechanics, the character psychology, and the underlying structure that makes a story like this so incredibly gripping. Let's get into it.
So check out this chilling tagline that serves as our cold open. The system made him a ghost. Now he's haunting the men who built it. Man, that just perfectly sets the atmospheric prestige noir tone for the whole series. It tells us right out of the gate that we are not dealing with your standard run-of-the-mill revenge plot here. No, we are dealing with systemic abuse, institutional erasure, and a protagonist who has been entirely stripped of his identity, only to come back as an invisible force against the very people who created him.
To really understand how this works, we're going to methodically deconstruct the mechanics of this story using this roadmap. First, we'll cover the ghost returns, then the anatomy of a whistleblower. After that, we'll meet the faces of the machine, look at the 3-book blueprint, and finally wrap up with why this series works from an industry perspective.
All right, starting right off with Section 1, the ghost returns. We're deconstructing the reluctant avenger.
The narrative kicks off with our protagonist, Bobby Varick, literally walking back into SCI Pittsburgh. Now get this, that is the exact same prison that completely destroyed his life. But he walks in under a totally false identity, Martin Keyes, prison reform advocate. What's absolutely fascinating here is how Bobby defies all those typical action tropes. He's a former systems engineer, he's hyper-controlled, emotionally muted, and instead of throwing punches or firing a gun, his only weapon is evidence. He's seeking systemic exposure. He's deliberately choosing not to become the violent monster that this prison tried to turn him into.
And that brings us to this brilliant core thematic conflict, the ghost versus the architect. On one side of the ring, you have Bobby Varick, the invisible, wronged man who is armed with literally nothing but the truth and undeniable evidence. Then, on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, you have Mitchell Brennan. He's this untouchable mastermind shielded by a massive corporate machine sitting way up in Zvezvetko Tower. It's the ultimate David and Goliath battle, right? It's the kind of dynamic that instantly makes you root for the underdog. Moving right along to Section 2, Anatomy of a Whistleblower, where we are mapping out the conspiracy. As Bobby starts executing his takedown of SCI Pittsburgh, the pitch constantly hammers home one vital fact. He wasn't a killer. Think about a typical prison thriller. Usually, in a scene where the hero is cornered by a ruthless Aryan Brotherhood gang in the showers, it ends with a makeshift shank, right? But here, no way. Bobby doesn't throw a single punch. Instead, he uses his intellect and his hidden recordings to completely flip the power dynamic. He disarms his enemies without shedding a single drop of blood. It's a real game changer. So instead of violence, he weaponized truth. He actually takes the system's own deeply buried secrets and uses them to dismantle the whole thing from the inside out. He carries this small black notebook. Now, it's not a kill list. It's a meticulously mapped out web of corruption. We're talking detailed logs of every falsified report and every single ignored assault. Okay, so how does he actually pull this off? Well, Bobby attacks the system in 3 incredibly methodical steps. First up, he corners a corrupt, cowardly guard named Dale Huxley in a blind spot in the prison hallway to extract a confession. Second, he sneaks into the prison's underground maintenance tunnels, punches in a keypad code, 4732, which he memorized years ago, and hacks the server room to download Warden Stockton's hidden files. And third, the grand finale, he locks himself in an empty conference room and executes a mass public upload directly to the FBI, civil rights groups, and the media. Boom, truth released.
That takes us to Section 3, Faces of the Machine. Let's look at the hierarchy of corruption.
To really grasp the scale of this conspiracy, we have to look at the ecosystem inside the prison. It's like a pyramid of rot. At the very top, you have Warden Stockton. He's the ultimate bureaucratic villain who will protect the institution at any human cost. Just below him is Dale Huxley. Huxley represents the weak link, that everyday, weaponized cowardice that just turns a blind eye and lets evil happen. And then, at the bottom, doing the dirty work, you have Ricky Bone DeLuca. He's the enforcer who symbolizes the raw, unchecked violence that the system quietly allows to flourish behind closed doors. But here's the kicker. The corruption doesn't just stop at the prison gates. Not even close. Beyond those walls, the network reaches all the way up to Zvezvetko Tower. Up there, we find Mitchell Brennan, the mastermind. Protecting him is Elias Vance, a completely ruthless private security cleaner whose whole job is making problems disappear. Then we have Mara Ellison, Brennan's assistant. She actually becomes Bobby's very first thread into this elite world. And finally, Councilman Hale, who provides all the necessary political cover. What this really shows us is that the prison, it's just a symptom. The actual disease is the massive corporate and political machine operating above it. All right, Section 4, the 3-book blueprint. We're looking at the franchise arc. Let's zoom out for a second and look at the macro structure to see how this seamlessly builds into a multi-season franchise. The scale of the series escalates so perfectly. Book 1, Inside the Walls, functions as this really contained pressure cooker prison thriller where Bobby exposes SCI Pittsburgh. Then, Book 2, The Architect, explodes outward into a citywide conspiracy as Bobby takes the fight to that outside network. And finally, it all culminates in Book 3, The Tower, which ascends into this almost mythic corporate takedown right in the beating heart of Brennan's empire.
Just look at that character arc. It is absolutely wild. Back in Book 1, Bobby is essentially a traumatized ghost haunting a graveyard. He's just desperately trying to escape the walls and expose this localized pocket of corruption. But by Book 3, he has evolved into an absolute legend. He is systematically ascending the corporate tower to destroy the overarching machine from the inside out. It's just this incredible, satisfying evolution from being a victim of the system to becoming its ultimate dismantling force.
And that brings us to our final section, Part 5, Why This Series Works, focusing on the industry appeal. So let's break down why this character Bible makes for such a highly viable piece of IP, and honestly, what we can all learn from it if we're building our own stories. It works so well because it perfectly marries a highly commercial conspiracy thriller format with deep psychological character studies. It slots right into that prestige-noir lane that audiences absolutely crave right now. Think shows like True Detective or Mr. Robot. It gives us a high-concept plot that is grounded in very real, very relatable fears about systemic corruption and surveillance, all anchored by a strong, mythic protagonist. Plus, as we just saw with the timeline, it comes pre-packaged with a very clear, multi-season franchise structure. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a provocative thought that really captures the absolute essence of Bobby Varick's journey. Ask yourself, if the system won't deliver justice, what happens when truth becomes a weapon? It's a heavy question, right? But it's exactly what makes this narrative so insanely compelling, and it definitely leaves us eager to see this dark, thrilling story hit the screen. Thank you so much for joining me today. And hey, keep questioning the systems around you.